Before I get into the video, I want to point out and state that everything I'm about to speak on, open up about, all legitimately happened to me within the past month. This is not a clickbait video, and the main reason for me making this is to answer questions people have asked and kind of address it to those less aware of the situation. Now, before I go any further, for those unaware of what I'm talking about, as you read in the title, I had a stroke on March 15th, 2021. Now, one of the biggest questions I've been getting asked from people who know me in real life is, why haven't I uploaded the video yet? What's taking so long to inform them? And the simplicity of it is, I wanted to get in contact with the paramedics who essentially saved my life. I wanted to have a doctor's appointment with my doctor to answer any unanswered questions I had, gain information about the situation, as well as contact my insurance and various other things so that I can openly talk about everything all at once without leaving out any information. So anyone who was legitimately curious or wanted to know what was happening or just wanted an update on my life can just visit this video and have all their answers packed into one thing without me having to provide information in different segments. Now, as I stated, this incident happened on March 15th, 2021. This was my first day back at my actual day job after my vacation trip to Houston with my fiance, Alexis. Now, while in Houston, it was hard for me to find things to eat because a little backstory that potentially led into what happened is I am a type 1 diabetic, and back in November, I was diagnosed with onset diabetic kidney disease. So this caused me to have to drastically change up my diet, essentially kind of going into a modified version of a keto meal plan. While in Houston, it was difficult for me to find things to eat due to the COVID pandemic and how Houston itself is treating the pandemic, especially with us choosing to reside in the Asian town so that we could be close to things that make Lexi feel at home and find food that really reminds her of a happier time in her life. So we were in Houston for about 3-4 days, and the entire time we were there, I was struggling to find meals to eat, to keep my blood sugar up, to regulate my stability. Now, I'm not saying that's her fault. That's mostly on me. There were definitely things in Houston that I could have pursued and could have sought out to eat, but the traffic in Houston just absolutely infuriated me. I hated driving through the city. I hated getting on the interstate. I basically just wanted to spend the entire trip in the hotel and want to return home, but she was happy being there, and I wanted to take her to go see places and do things, so we did. But whenever it came time to eat, if it wasn't in our immediate vicinity, I had no interest in it because of just the traffic. That is 100% my fault, and I am to blame there. I should have considered my health more than simply my irritation levels. So the first thing I did when we did get back from Houston is I got back on my regular diet, started eating what I was normally eating at the time. And I thought that was enough to balance it. Granted, what I was eating were really low carb counts, and I just came back from a vacation trip where I didn't really know the carb levels for what I was eating. I didn't know the sustainability of the food. And Lexi said that I was acting weird when we got home, that I was kind of loopy here and I was loopy there. And I was like, I'm just having fun. I'm glad to be back home. Why not? I just kind of brushed her off. Well, fast forward to the next day. I have to go to work. Granted, this is the first day I've returned to my actual job in a 2-week period because I was off work. So I go in, and I think I was working a short day, like a 5-hour day. First hour and a half goes by, no problem. Next 30 minutes, I start feeling a little dizzy, a little lightheaded, and I asked to go sit down. So I went to go sit down, and that's kind of the last thing I remember from the incident. So everything I'm about to speak on now are accounts from everyone that I work with, paramedics, and from word of mouth from the tow truck driver that initially discovered me and dialed 911. Now, my day job, I work in a bank, both teller, banker, all around everything in a bank to best assist customers with any needs they may have. Now, that being said, according to my coworker, I was assisting a customer with a really simple transaction, and I was there for 25 minutes just wasting his time, basically. And it caused him to get irritated. I passed the work to my coworker, who told me I looked off. I was sweating. I was slurring words. I couldn't talk in straight, coherent sentences. I was swaying when I stood. I kept having to kneel down or lift my mask off my face to breathe because I was struggling to breathe. And what was happening is my blood sugar greatly plummeted and I was having a panic attack. That was, according to my doctor, that was his best guess on the situation. And now that panic attack ended up drastically, I guess, messing with the hormones in my body, and it caused my blood sugar to drop more and more instead of slowly dropping or kind of balancing out. I just was in free fall. And for those unaware, when you have a really low blood sugar as a diabetic, that can lead to you going into a coma. That can lead to your body shutting down. It basically is very bad. And I was in a free fall mode, which means I couldn't drive. I needed sugar inside my body, and no one was aware of what was happening. And without me being aware of what was happening to me, and at this point, I wasn't even conscious. Well, not conscious. I wasn't mentally conscious and aware of what I was doing. I was running on autopilot. I basically said, I need to go get food. I will be right back. And I left. I left the bank. I got in my car and I just started driving. Now, the only reason I managed to get found in the first place is because I passed a tow truck driver who was on his way to a salvage yard a mile down the road to drop off a vehicle. And I guess the way I was driving concerned him and caused him to double back and check the area. And because of him is the reason I'm here today, because he called 911 to get a hold of the paramedics and told them everything that happened. And from what he told them, they told me apparently I was driving 50 in a 35 on a service road on the side of the freeway, and I just seized up, stopped moving, and caused my vehicle to take a hard left off the service road, down a ditch, jumped over a, like, I guess they called it a pit stop road because it's kind of like a dead end that was like a quarter of a mile, ramped over that street and hit a tree, and my vehicle just got stuck. From there, his story seemed a little weird. Apparently, I crawled out of my trunk, which I do drive a hatchback, so I could just go from my seat to out of my trunk. Crawled out of my trunk, started sprinting in circles, fell over, roamed through the woods, popped back out, noticed his vehicle, and crawled into his passenger seat and just started throwing papers and everything on the side of the road. He thought, obviously, I was on drugs. I mean, let's be real here. If any of us were in that situation, we would all assume that person is immediately on drugs. He tried to restrain me. I managed to get loose and just ran and hid in the trees. This is roughly around the time that I do start regaining my consciousness and I'm aware of what's happening. Granted, even though I'm starting to become aware now, everything feels like a dream to me because everything's blurry, everything's kind of loopy, everything's bright. I wasn't aware what was happening was real. I was 100% convinced that I was dreaming right now. And I came to walking through a tree line to the back of an ambulance because it's like sirens. I'm going to see what's happening. And basically was being beckoned by 2 or 3 paramedics to come take a seat. Now, as I said, this is where I started to become conscious and I was able to actually be aware of everything that was happening. I was in the back of that ambulance on that street for about 45 minutes to an hour. I had an IV in my arm. They were pumping multiple different drips into me. I had to consume some type of jelly to get sugar in my body. I had to do 9 or 10 different blood tests to make sure that my sugar level is regulated. And I ain't even gonna lie, this is kind of where I broke down emotionally because it was at this point I realized, oh fuck, this isn't a dream. This is happening. This is real. And they made me call my fiance, tell her that I was in an incident, that I had an accident. She had to come pick me up. I had to be driven home. I couldn't return to work for the remainder of that day or the next day. I was forced to stay home. And it was just kind of everything came crashing all at once, realizing I don't remember the past 3 to 5 hours of my life. I don't know where I am. I'm not dreaming. My car is stuck and just hit a tree. I've got to basically have all this stuff full blown realized, hey, this is on me. And it was scary. I was unaware. I didn't know who to call. So I called fiance. She came to get me. They made me call my dad or anyone that I knew who could possibly come get my vehicle because they was physically unable to get out. The tow truck driver that was there that called 911 had other calls, so he was gone. And it just kind of all came around where in a matter of like 15 minutes, my phone was blowing up from my sister, my dad, my mom, my brother, my fiance, my boss from work who was unaware that I left and called me to find out what was going on, the boss whose branch that I was assisting, and just all this other stuff. And I could barely talk. Like I was having a problem getting words out of my mouth because I was in such a state of shock. I was waiting for a tow truck to get there because there was one police officer left on stream. And by the way, there were like 4 different cop cars there with roughly 9 to 10 officers that showed up because of the 911 call that was placed. They weren't sure if I was a danger to myself, a danger to anyone on the street, or what was happening. But there I was in the ambulance and just cop car after cop car showed up until they were like, okay, well, he's good now. We'll leave him in the ambulance till his fiance gets here. Almost all the cop cars left except for one because he had to be there until my vehicle got picked up. And I was sitting there for about another 30 minutes in my fiance's vehicle until I realized that my dad couldn't come get there. My mom's new boyfriend wasn't able to get in contact with anyone, and we were just waiting on the tow truck. Now, fast forward about 2-3 weeks later, after I had gotten back to work, spoke with all the people I was working with, got my report from the police records office, spoke with my insurance, picked up my vehicle, dropped my vehicle off for repairs, and everything I found out, apparently, because as I said, the last thing I remembered prior to waking up in the ambulance was going to go sit down. Apparently, after that happened, I went to the restroom. I spoke with one of the people about possibly swapping lunches because like I would like to go later if possible. To basically curling up in a corner in the back, taking deep breaths because I couldn't breathe, to just straight up saying, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to go get food. And then kicking open a door and just walking out of the branch to get in my car, despite 2 employees telling me they thought it was a bad idea to drive. And then having to drop my vehicle off, which, by the way, ended up costing me thankfully I had insurance, but the total damage to my vehicle was $8,000. Due to my vehicle insurance, I had to pay $500 out of pocket, which $500 for an unexpected expense, that sucks, but at least I didn't have to pay $8,000. To speaking with my doctor, visiting the hospital about that, kind of having them take a look at my brain to see if there were any spots or holes or anything. And basically what I was told is I was in a state of diabetic shock, which triggered me to have a panic attack on top of underlying stress that I was already going through, which provoked my body to go into a diabetic stroke, which I didn't even know was a thing until then. Like, if you would have asked me, I would have just been like, I had a panic attack. I didn't know diabetic strokes were a possibility, but from the report that my doctor read, from what I relayed to him, and from everything else, he was like, dude, you had a diabetic stroke. You were borderline about to enter a coma. If they wouldn't have gotten to you when they did with the IV, it would have been a different story, and you may not be here to talk about it. And the whole incident was just scary, from scaring the hell out of my fiance by making her live through one of her worst fears of potentially losing a loved one, to having to answer questions on the spot of people just repeatedly asking these, to snapping to reality from what you assume is a dream. It's just all a terrifying thing to suddenly come to a realization of. And I had people ask, like, is it true? Did you smell burnt toast? I was like, dude, I can't remember 3 to 5 hours to this day. Like, there's just a blacked out window of my life that I will probably never remember. No, I don't know if I smelled burnt toast. To, did the stroke cause you to have any permanent effects? Did it mess with you? And I didn't have any permanent effects, but for a good while, probably about a week to 2 weeks, I felt kind of like verbally dyslexic, if that's a thing. Like, I was saying sentences backwards and words weren't coming to me as they were. Like, just kind of everything got jumbled in my head and I was slurring my words constantly. I would start talking with one thing and then end up way over here and then backtrack to that. So my sentences weren't regular and they made sense to me. To me, they sounded perfectly fine. But it wasn't until people started pointing out and asked me to repeat myself and this and that I began to realize what's happening. But fortunately, I was able to recover from that and I'm back to normal. So I don't think I have any permanent damage. That was about it. Like, and I want to say a massive thank you to my Discord community, which, by the way, if you're not in my Discord, link will be in the description below. They've acted like a second family through this entire thing, talking to me through the stroke incident, playing games with me, chatting with me, trying to joke and have laughs with me. All that they could do to try to keep my mind away from the trauma that I went through, to keep me on a road to recovery and getting better. But due to this incident, it did inspire me to create a new ongoing YouTube series that I'm going to be titling Transparency of Life. And in the comments, you can comment any topic, any scenario, anything that you would want to hear my raw, unfiltered opinion on, that you would like for me to recall from my past on, whether it's past relationships, my political views, which I honestly don't really have any, just kind of leave me alone, let me do my own thing, from my views on this or that, etc., etc. And I will make YouTube videos detailing my exact, raw, unfiltered, unedited opinion and views on things, because this made me realize that if I were to go out, who's going to be able to accurately speak on my behalf? Who's going to know the real me from the persona that I put on streams, from the jester that I play here, the jester that I play there? I want to provide a 100% accurate detail of who I am based on questions that people ask, and I've never really done that in my life. So if there's anything that you want to know specifically from my past, from my view, just comment it down below, and I'm going to start making a whole series based off of what you guys would like to know about me.